Hello, everyone, and welcome to this final conversation of The Future Scientist. I'm James Barbieri, Program Coordinator here at the Power Center, and your host for today. As a host, I'm here to help you, so any problems, feel free to just let me know in the chat. Just very briefly, let me remind you to please mute your microphones and that the chat is open, so feel free to share your thoughts in the chat with the rest of the group. And that finally, this session is recorded for archival purposes, and that you should receive the link, the YouTube link, in a few days. So today we have a very much in-house session for the Future Scientist, as we will have Alex Gómez-Marín, Director of the Power Center, in conversation with Dr. Shantena Sabbadini, or former Director of the Power Center. Shantena graduated from the University of Milan and was awarded his PhD in physics from the University of California. In California, he contributed to the theoretical work behind the first identification of a black hole, the X-ray source Cygnus X1. In the 90s, he was a scientific consultant for the Eranos Foundation, where he produced various translations and commentaries of Chinese classics in Italian and English, such as the I Ching and the trilogy Taoist Classics. From 2002 onwards, he collaborated with F. David Pete, running the Power Center, and in 2017, he succeeded his friend and colleague as director of the center until this year. His most recent book in English is Pilgrimages to Emptiness, Rethinking Reality Through Quantum Physics, which was published by the Power Publishing in 2017. Alex is a physicist turned neuroscientist. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics and a master's in biophysics from the University of Barcelona. In 2016, he has been head of the Behavior of Organisms Laboratory at the Instituto de Neurociencia in Alicante, associate professor of the Spanish Research Council. And with that, I'll hand it straight over to you to welcome Alex and Shantena.
All right. Thank you very much, James, as always. It's really great to have you here, Shantena. You're always with us, but today we're going to have the last installment of the Future Scientist, and it's really good. It can be you who comes here. And well, I'm very curious about many things. We're going to be talking about the I Ching, but before I wanted to ask you I Ching. All right, first thing to learn, I Ching. I wanted to ask you first about yourself, more about yourself, being a physicist, translator and farmer, and what brought you to translating, and in particular translating the I Ching?
That's kind of like is on the edge of another more difficult question, and it's how do all these things go together? But yes. I started translating as a way to earn a living, which would still allow me freedom. And I was at the time spending quite a bit of time in the East, especially in India, and translating was a very comfortable job for that, because I could do it sitting on a beach in Goa. And at some point, the publisher that I was doing translations for became very interested in Eranos. And the really interesting things that were going on there, one of these was Rudolf Ritzema translating the I Ching. Rudolf Ritzema was at the time the director of the Eranos, and a devotee of the I Ching since quite young. He met the I Ching when he was 19 and was still studying the I Ching when he passed away in 1986. So that connected me to the I Ching, connected me to Eranos, and was a good chunk of my life.
why does one need to devote so much time to translating a text like this? At least that's what I imagine. It's like it's not just a job. It sounds, it feels, it looks like a project you devote a great deal of your life. What's special about the I Ching that requires that?
I think the I Ching leads us, brings us to the edge of a question which is very close, I feel, to the spirit of the future scientist enterprise, that wonderful idea that you've developed, Alex. Is reality entirely describable by science, or is it not? If it is not, then maybe the I Ching can tell us something, can, or at least suggest that we focus more intensely on the question of what's scientific, what other modes of cognition exist, what we want to develop. And another question is the universe helping us in that?
Mm.
Is it neutral and objective, or somehow a mother?
Mm.
So working with the I Ching brings you to pose such questions.
We'll see later. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
No, I was going to say, I wasn't expecting to hear that the I Ching can help us beyond divination, which is something I want to discuss further. So I will come back to this idea of helping. But since you suggested other modes of knowing, you said cognition, but maybe can be also expressed as other modes of knowing. What is that mode of knowing or cognition that the I Ching offers? And maybe it's also offered by other systems, psychological systems or traditions. What is that mode of knowing that in a way could complement, perhaps, could complement the scientific way?
Absolutely. And the mode of knowing was very clearly stated by C.G. Jung as with the term synchronicity. What is synchronicity? First of all, the name is to some extent inappropriate, because it suggests like things happening at the same time. It's not necessarily the case, but the connecting, the bridge is meaning. So it's like the I Ching invites us to look at things as meaningful. And that's in a way complementary to the scientific approach. This issue is discussed in a very illuminating way by Wolfgang Pauli and C.G. Jung in their correspondence that lasted 25 years. Wolfgang Pauli, who was a very interesting character on its own, went to Jung for therapy, but Jung didn't take him in therapy. He gave him to one of his students. He kept him for himself as a correspondent in this masterly work of correspondence that they carried on. And one of the issues they were discussing was synchronicity. Jung had brought his work on synchronicity to Eranos in 1950. And in the year 1950, 1951, his correspondence with, dense correspondence with Jung, largely focused on synchronicity. Jung at the time was very interested in the experiment of Duke in Northern Carolina on parapsychology. And he raised the question, can we understand synchronicity in the same way, or in the same mode? And another question, can synchronicity be studied scientifically? Or can it be studied statistically? Interesting. Pauli's answer was essentially no. He said statistics or the scientific approach and synchronicity are complementary modes of understanding reality. When you break it down to statistics, you break it down to the reproducible. Synchronicity by its very nature, by being so closely related to meaning, cannot break down to the reproducible. But the reproducible is the key element of science. So Pauli essentially says, no, it cannot be studied that way. And he throws in another precious little note, which is the unique. What's happening in this moment between you, Alex, and me, and all the people who are with us, invisible, it's unique. It's something which cannot be reproduced and studied in a statistical way.
Could I add to that? Nevertheless, and I'm absolutely ignorant about the I Ching. In a way, you're teaching me for the first time what it is. In a way, isn't it a system? It is a system of divination. And I want to ask you about divination as opposed to prediction. But being a system, and actually I got the copy. I mean, this seems in a way, maybe just the appearance, pretty scientific, you see? There are rules as to how you toss the coins. It's very systematized. There's something in it that feels scientific. And at the same time, I understand what you're saying. It draws on the very qualities of life that science has just put aside because they don't lend themselves to the so-called method. But maybe what I'm trying to do here is, to what extent can these two complementary ways be blended, or how blended they are? Meaning the I Ching being perhaps a bit scientific and science at least those of us who are trying to
Yeah.
push science towards being more meaningful and maybe able to grasp a little bit towards this gradient of the unique.
Right. Yeah. Yes, it's true what you're saying. The I Ching is a bridge. It comes from shamanic practices of the 2nd millennium BC, of the Shang shamans. They would like read cracks in animal bones or turtle shells and give meaning to these random happenings.
What do you
Sorry? Yeah. So the I Ching connects those divinatory practices to the theory of yin and yang, which is methodical, scientific. So it brings together something which is completely intuitive and meaning driven. Meaning, well, I think we have to interpret meaning as the same quality we appreciate in a work of art, which cannot be exactly formulated, which actually gets somewhat lost when you try to formulate it, but has form. So yes, the I Ching is a bridge between, in one way, we could say, like thinking of our friend Ian McGilchrist, it's a bridge between right and left hemisphere.
Now, before we continue, let me confess a prejudice of mine, and I'm sure you will lovingly hold it. So we may mention the I Ching in the same way as we could, same way, quote unquote, in an analogous way as when we, for instance, here in the West, and I'm speaking from the West, from Spain, where we talk about Tibetan Buddhism. And now, if instead of talking about the I Ching or Tibetan Buddhism, I will be talking about tarot. Is it the word in English? Tarot, yes. And the analogy would be Christianity. Maybe the receptivity is different. So let me put it in other words. My first impulse, and I know you and I respect you, and so I think your work is serious and valuable. So that's why I'm really eager to learn what the I Ching is. But I still have my skeptical concerns about the I Ching as, in a way, tarot, as making up patterns. You know, I must confess, there's a neuroscientist in me. No matter how hard I try to be heterodox or even heretic by chance, but there's an orthodox neuroscientist that says, well, but could it all just be patterns in the sky, in the clouds, and simply a very interesting and sophisticated and millenarian way of looking at the sky and making things up by looking at the clouds?
I'm with you. So maybe we need a third person to uphold the I Ching most rigorous approach. Well, the Chinese were convinced that this is the map of heaven and earth. It's the map of everything. Is that true? I don't know. But I know that a system which is complex enough and sophisticated enough can, let's say, can give birth to meaning. The making sense of it, making sense of this broken and whole line that we construct by throwing coins or dividing yarrow stalks. a question that inevitably comes up in our scientific skeptical mind is, if you got any other random combination of lines, could you maybe have made sense of it anyway?
Yes.
I tend to think yes. But to me, that doesn't discard the I Ching as a form of knowing. It illuminates its extreme subtlety. But some I Ching scholars would not agree with me.
Yes. Well, probably the control experiment is not even possible, but it's intriguing and also funny that you're saying that even the control experiment would be meaningful. So it would defy, once again, our usual scientific habits, right? Of saying, well, the counterfactual, right? What if I would do things otherwise and then compare? Well, because it dwells in the moment and the unique. It doesn't let you do that. So it's a corrective for humility in a way, but at the same time, challenging.
Yeah, a common event when you do I Ching with people is that at some point they do something wrong. And the question is it valid? What I get? I would say yes, sure. That's what the universe is mirroring back to you at this moment.
Yeah, that's even funnier. So if you toss the coins and you don't add well the numbers,
right,
still you get an hexagram, and still you can read and interpret what it says. But you mentioned giving birth to meaning. That's a juicy idea, right? Because it's not making things up. You also said sense making, which is quite fashionable today on social media. So many channels trying to address sense making, but giving birth to meaning. Can you say more about that? I want to hear more about the difference between giving birth to meaning, midwiving, co-creating the meaning, and just making things up.
Well, maybe it's the difference between a very nice coffee and a Nescafe. To give birth to meaning in a significant way, you need to offer yourself to the experiment. What we usually say is like your emotional involvement with your question is what fires meaning in the answer. So it's you when you wrote the preface to Wilhelm's translation of the I Ching, wonderful text. If you don't know it, I warmly recommend it. He does the same thing that we want to do tonight. He asked the I Ching about writing a preface to Wilhelm's translation, and gets a very meaningful answer, or at least an answer that he makes meaning out of in a very powerful way. It comes to describe really the difficulty of a Western mind to approach a book like the I Ching.
now as a footnote, because I want to continue along this thread, but when we say the Western mind, what about the Eastern mind today? Do Chinese people today, can they embrace the I Ching in a way we cannot, or is in a way the Western mind has just conquered the whole globe? And when we say Western, we mean Western as opposed to Eastern a few thousand years ago.
Yeah. I think in the East, the I Ching has survived by going underground. For example, during the Mao Zedong time, and it still has its devotees in the old style. But what, interestingly enough, there's also a growing interest for the way the West is approaching it. A friend of mine who was the president of the Eranos for some years, regularly goes to China giving courses on the I Ching. I myself did once a course in Beijing, which was quite hilarious, because I was working with an English translation of the Chinese text. A translator was translating what I was saying into modern Chinese.
Yes.
People would respond in modern Chinese, and the translator would bring it back to English to me. Yes. You would say, could such an absurd operation give something? Funnily, yes. Surprisingly, people seem to get meaning out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So what is this mysterious thing we call meaning?
Yeah. And why is it so rooted in the present, right? Because one thing that one quickly needs to correct when learning what the I Ching is that it's not about forecasting or predicting. Divination, and divination is not something we're brought up with, the idea of divination, right? What is divination, Shantena?
Divination assumes that the future is already there. So it's like reading something which exists. In some ways, it's close to some ways of understanding physics. Like the block universe. And whether it's supported by physics or not, the use of the I Ching as divination, as predicting the future, what will happen, is still common, and I would say even like probably the majority of people who use the I Ching use it that way. At Eranos, we have developed a different perspective on it. More shaped by Jung's notion of synchronicity. And when I give I Ching seminars, I call them mirror of the present. in that it's easy and natural understanding the I Ching as somehow reflecting you in the moment you consulted and the situation you're in. There's the whole synchronistic happening. So the I Ching in that sense is like mining for synchronicity, invoking synchronicity.
Now, sorry, because I already have so many things I'd like to run by you. So these meaningful coincidences, are they enhanced? Are they provoked? Because something I've read about synchronicity is that, well, today we use the word as basically anything that happens at any moment that feels meaningful, but in a way there's a weak sense and a strong sense of synchronicity. Now, and as I understand, synchronicity doesn't subscribe to causal principles. It's more like a causal principle, which is a formidable idea, also in physics. Now, can these synchronicities in a strong sense be multiplied, enhanced by the I Ching, or is the I Ching more like fishing into them, but the number of fish that are swimming in the lake or the river is the same? You see what I mean? And sorry if my question is again very left brain Western oriented.
No, it seems a very meaningful question. It is a common experience, I would say, that when you pay attention to synchronicity, they tend to multiply. So it's like, in that sense, like a familiarity with the I Ching and the use of the I Ching may indeed bring you to experience more synchronicity. Why? Or you could explain it in many ways, like including like your mind, your attention is already pointed to such events. But let's say the way we've used the I Ching at Eranos and the way I'm still using it is as a mirror of the present. It tells you something about yourself now. Is that simply like whatever it tells you, you'll be able to make sense of it? Or somehow the universe is offering you meaning in a deeper way?
Yeah.
That's the question I have no answer for.
I like that metaphor of the mirror. So this makes the I Ching etymologically psychedelic, right? Because it reveals your own psyche, and more than your own psyche, perhaps.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the future being there, this very act of mirroring oneself and the situation seems to also alter the future in the present, right? So in that sense, it's not entirely like the block universe. Yeah. So another way of putting it is those who practice the I Ching probably should believe that there is such thing as freedom, right?
Yeah.
True freedom. Otherwise, why bother? Well, you could say, well, I'm sure many illusionists could claim, well, you just look at yourself in the mirror, but it doesn't make any difference. But it makes a difference. Despite not trying to predict, it's less predicting and more affecting the future through the present.
Right. There's an element of creativity in it. And that brings me back to Pauli's conversation with Jung. Pauli says at one point something which I've always found it very interesting. He talks about the unique and says the unique in physics has surfaced in the most unexpected place. And this place is the the quantum experiment, quantum unpredictability, quantum uncertainty. And he says that's the result of a quantum experiment is an act of creation.
Mm.
So there's this other ingredient in the story, which is creativity, the creativity of the universe manifesting in one specific form when you do it, the I Ching.
And this brings us to chance and randomness. It is as if I had a list of concepts to discuss with you, but I'm realizing by doing this, you're transforming them into something much more alive and even sacred. So let's go for a couple more. So now chance and randomness, that's the waters from which this wine is created, right? So
Right.
what's the understanding of chance and randomness for the Chinese, for the I Ching in that respect? And is it commensurate with the understanding we can have as to lack of signal or unpredictability or lack of knowledge even, right? How do these ideas map?
It's like the way we use randomness is simply, it's a way of giving up. It's saying like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't perceive any pattern in it.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
maybe
Just wanted to add, my favorite philosopher, Henry Bergson, says randomness is the order one is not expecting. Therefore, it's a bit of an inconvenience, right?
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, and one way of looking at it is like randomness is order of an infinite order.
Mm.
So indecipherable, but maybe it's the only thing that's worth deciphering.
Mm. You're a poet, Shantena. Yes, physicist, farmer, translator, and poet. Mm. Now, chance and context. What about context?
Say something.
Because let me preface that, because it's a rather, as physicists, I would say, we sneak in, we push like with a broom context to initial conditions for time and boundary conditions for space, right? So we have these distillations, which are the equations, and then contingencies go there. Like if you're a contingency, please go there, either through initial condition or boundary condition. Now in biology, we know that this starts to break down because there's no ceteris paribus. There's not all else being equal, right? Now in the limit where this is not possible at all, perhaps that's again the limit of the I Ching, right? Another challenge to our Western ways of thinking, where context is totally radical and constitutive, not decoration.
Yeah. In the I Ching, context is present in the multiplicity of meanings that the Chinese characters have. Because that's one interesting aspect of the I Ching and great challenge for the foolish people that try to translate this, is that the Chinese characters have a wide range of meanings, which are not each one, like say, like strongly defined, but kind of merging and melting into each other in ways which sometimes in the end produce the exact opposite of what you started with. But has like subtle contextual wisdom in it. I'm thinking of a word which I don't remember the Chinese word, but I remember it means friend, partner, a person close to you, close to your heart, and enemy, someone who you should run from. And
yes.
so in some ways, the Chinese culture is an underlying like quantum fluctuations of a background in which nothing is rigidly defined forever.
Yes. Look, I don't like the analogies based on software and hardware, but it seems like the programming language of the I Ching runs on those ambivalent or those multiplicity of characters. So it seems to further support all those things. Like we could make a list now of things that defy our ways of thinking, because that ambiguity is precisely what you would want to avoid in any piece of software you write. When you were talking about the possibility and the reality that synchronicities multiply, that would defy any conservation principle or conservation law. So it's interesting. It looks as if it is done on purpose. All of these elements are put there on purpose to push our habits, which is what we're trying to do with the future scientist. So let me bring this back to the future scientist and ask you both, those past quote unquote scientists and the future ones yet to come, will they be fluent with all these poetic and very tangible concepts, and more than concepts, entities even we're discussing today? Or do you see both strands as maybe dancing one around the other, these complementary ways of knowledge, but everyone with kind of their limits, their bounds of operation?
I think the way where we are now, it's easier to foresee the second option, the dance, which still remains at some level essentially separate. But that the less clearly definable things are, the more relevant they seem to be for our life. And yeah.
Okay, let's do something we agreed we would do. It's a surprise for our lovely audience and family and participants, because this is the last installment of the Future Scientist, and we're talking with Shantena, and you know very well how to navigate this. We're gonna now, before the comments and questions from the audience, we're gonna, what's the proper verb? We're gonna run the I Ching. We're gonna
consult
the I Ching, And so let's see if we can do this in a kind of agile way. It's the first time I do it, and it's the first time I do it online as well.
And for
So,
me, it's the first time I do this sort of experiment.
okay, so let's do something interesting here. So I did my homework. I have the translation and 3 coins, Shantena.
Perfecto.
Okay, so maybe you can explain how it's done in case somebody at home wants to do it
Sure,
at any moment.
cool.
So we'll have like a good master, like a crash course on I Ching consultation. Yes.
Certainly. You consult the I Ching by dividing a bunch of 50 sticks, which are traditionally stalks of the Achillea plant, or the shorter version is by throwing 3 coins. Each coin has one side that we decide it's yang and one we decide is yin. That's related to numbers. Yang is 3, yin is 2. When we throw 3 coins, we get 2, 2, 2, or 2, 2, 3, and so on. That defines one line, which can be like a whole line or a broken line. A whole line is yang, a broken line is yin, and they can be young or old. They can be stable or changing. In the notion of yin and yang is all the time changing. It's this famous picture of the white and black mixing it, turning around and around. And so our lines can be also stable or changing. Once we've got our 6th line, our hexagram, we look it up in the book. There's a page which allows you to identify by crossing a column and a line and a row. Yes, it identifies what's your hexagram. Then you go and read the text. Read the text of the hexagram in the spirit of as if you were interpreting a dream. So let your mind freely associate on it. Whatever you perceive is somehow meaningful. There's no way of going wrong. The Chinese use the expression rolling the words in your heart. Ancient Chinese, by the way, does not distinguish heart from mind. They have the same word.
Now, what consultations are allowed? Or what's the nature of the questions, right? Like I could ask for me, but of course, in this occasion, I want to ask for the future scientist, however vague and even abstract and distant that may sound. Is it still possible?
It is possible, although it's somewhat adventurous. I've never done it. I usually do the I Ching or help people to do the I Ching for themselves, for a specific situation in their life. This is it's a big vast as a question. But I recently did another vast consultation, kind of against the rules, so to speak, by doing an I Ching for the year 2023. And somehow the answer seemed very meaningful to me. So it encouraged me to do illegal things.
Now, maybe a second illegal or strange thing. What's the role of the community or the audience or the group here now, right? Because in a way, I am doing it with you, but with all these
That's right.
tens of dozens of people that are right now listening to us.
That's very important. Yeah. And
what's their job, to put it simply?
At Eanos, we did it around a round table. And the round table are kind of like a resonant body for the person asking the question. So we have this big resonant body here. It's kind of like an alchemical vessel, which something happens.
Yeah.
And this something may be different for each person, but may also have like a common thread running through it. But certainly the people who are part of it, who are present, are in some ways also doing their own divination.
All right. Should we start then?
Let's start.
Do I need to concentrate, meditate, or I can just stupidly drop the coins on the table?
I usually stupidly drop the coins with no hurry,
All right, so I've decided that 20, because these are euros, 20
Okay.
is yang and the face is yin. Okay.
Okay, very good.
All
So
right. I'll drop them. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So 2 yin and 1 yang.
2 yin and 1 yang is 2, 2, and 3. That's a 7.
Yeah. Okay.
7 is a whole line.
All right.
Again, with no change.
Another
That's
one.
the first line of your hexagram.
Starting from the bottom.
Starting from the bottom.
Okay. Another one.
Another one.
All right. The same. 2 yin and 1 yang. So it's another 7.
Okay. Another yang line.
Third one. Very good. The same thing again.
Okay, that's another 7.
Okay. Fourth one.
Yeah.
Oh, you will believe it. It's the same thing again.
Okay. Another 7.
Maybe I could show it. Well, doesn't matter. Okay, fifth one.
Okay.
Okay, now it changed. It's two yang and 1 yin, so it's an 8.
8. Okay. 8
Yes.
is a yin line, unchanged. No change.
This is, sorry, this is a broken line?
Broken line, yes.
Yeah. And so one more, right?
Yes.
All right. Again, 2 yin, 1 yang. So it's a 7.
Okay. Okay, you've got a hexagram with no changes. That makes it simple for us because we can just refer to that single hexagram.
All right.
So let's open the page. With the hexagrams.
It looks like it's 14. Could it be? Please check it out.
Energy and no, I would say it's energy and radiance. Yeah, that's 14. Perfect.
Okay.
"14 is called the great possessing. The kind of short version of it is the situation described by this hexagram is characterized by a central idea or long-term goal, which acts as an organizing force directing the course of one's life. The image of the situation is the core oracular text, and says, the great possessing, spring growing. Now, great in I Ching, great refers to like large-scale plans, wide vision. Spring growing, spring is the moment things arise, and growing is their development. So what it refers to like a powerful central idea, which acts as an organizing force. I'll read you another text. We won't have time to go through all the text of this hexagram, but just listen to the resonance of the preceding situation. Is number 13, which is called concording people. We could imagine these concording people when we refer it to the question we've asked. What's the future scientist like? The concording people could be the scientific community. The preceding situation text says, associating with people concording implies beings necessarily converting in truth. So there seems to be an evolution that moves from the scientific community convert is accomplish one's destiny, revert to the original place or state, restore, revert, turn into, goal, destination, intention. A girl getting married.
Now, this in truth is also puzzling.
Mm-hmm.
Beings necessarily converting, and the word here I'm reading for those who are not is in dash truth, like as a word, in truth, right?
Yeah. In truth is strengthening the statement. A final affirmative particle. The preceding statement is complete and correct.
I recall a version of the I Ching I once heard that had all these caveats or dangers that sounded pretty dramatic. It said, well, that's what it may mean. And some things look good, but beware, there are all these dangers. Where are they here? And by the way, at least your translation has 80, no, a bit less, maybe 10, a few pages to describe the whole hexagram and each of the pairs and each of the lines, right? So there's a lot we could read from, but we won't.
Right. Also, in principle, since we didn't get any changing line, we won't be concerned about the individual changing line, only the general texts. That's pretty minimal as constraint that reading give us, so we can like freely associate on it, or maybe fantasize on it. I'm somehow feeling that this word convert is important here. So what will the future scientist be like? She or he will be driven by a long-term goal, an organizing force. Something new is emerging, spring growing.
This convert doesn't sound, and it's not explained like this here, as convincing, which is our usual understanding, right? Convincing or even winning an argument. It's more about restoring, reverting to the original place, it says here.
Yeah.
Reverting. So it's a return in a way. I find that very beautiful.
Yeah. We could imagine that is somehow modern science arises out of alchemy and mystical vision of reality.
And it also says here, a girl getting married. So this idea of marriage evokes a coming together, right, of something that was disjointed. So that return may have to do with that original thrust that animated it all.
Yeah.
I see. Shantena, I will, of course, read it carefully later. Is there anything else you wish to mention about this now? Of course, there's a lot to say. Or should we
briefly mention this text called Patterns of Wisdom, which is fire above heaven. The great possessing. A Junzi is in the I Ching is the exemplary person. In Wilhelm's translation is the noble. A Junzi uses terminating hatred to display improvement, and yielding to heaven to relax into fate. So this terminating hatred might be sharp antagonism, which is, as we've so clearly seen throughout the series of the future scientist, the present situation.
Yeah.
one risk of asking very large questions, like we just did, is that you can read the answer in many possible ways.
Mm.
But
that's good enough, I think, or more, even more than good enough, because I also like the idea that this is I would say this is resonating with me, the powerful central idea, concording people. That to me speaks about Pari and the opportunity that has been given to me to belong to Pari. But I'm also not just curious, I also want this to resonate with the dozens of people watching now. So what it means for them, the future scientists, interestingly, whether or not you're a scientist or not. So I'm happy if it's even more multiple in the answers it can provide to everyone. I think, Shantena, with this is a good moment to open it up to the rest and have maybe 20, 25 minutes of comments and questions and remarks. Let me thank you again, Shantena, for doing this today, and also for that encounter we had 2 summers ago, before I couldn't even imagine that all of that would happen, and how incredible your mind and your heart is. Back to that word that I just forgot in Chinese that blends them all. I think that word also speaks about you. So thank you so much, Shantena.
Well, thank you. It's been so nice and generous of you to invite me to this talk. And I also carry a loving memory of that meeting on the beach and in the sea.
Yes.
What a better place could there be for new things being born in the sea?
All yours, James.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for such a profound conversation that we've had in the past hour, and of course for this little experiment of doing the I Ching here on Zoom. So as always, if you'd like to ask a question, everyone, you can use the raise your hand function, which is under reactions at the bottom of your screen. I can see a few have already raised their hands, or you can always write the question in the chat, either directly to me or publicly, and I can read that out to you. Firstly, I'd like to start with a question which came in the chat about an hour ago, actually, which is a combination of 2 different people writing a question, which is, how might science value and register the intuitive, or vice versa?
A quick answer for me before Shantena jumps in is that it already does. I think it already does. The great breakthroughs can be traced by historians and by the people themselves, those who had them, as moments of intuition, flashes, literally while dreaming. So in a way, maybe we need to nurture that more, but it's already an essential part of science, not something that we need to add to it. Without those intuitive insights, I don't think we would have had quantum mechanics, but even classical mechanics, to put an example that we may take for granted. That's what I would, and that's how I would react to that. But maybe we can expand.
I agree completely with Alex. I'm reminded of an anecdote. Was it? I think Henri Poincaré, who had been working on a difficult mathematical problem for months and months. And then one day, stepping on a bus, he saw the answer.
Or to put it in a McGilchrist way, this commute, I think his work can be summarized, well, hard to summarize because there's so much in it and it's not about summarizing it, but there's this commute from right to left to right. And a good example is, as he often points, is playing the piano, for instance. So perhaps you first you have this intuitive sense of the music. That's first. Then you may want to work it out. Like if you play guitar or piano, you work it out. That's maybe the more visible work of science, like, you know, that they're struggling in their laboratories, doing calculations. But to me, it's like a journey to return, by the way, which appeared in the I Ching, is a return, sorry, in the I Ching, sorry, is a return to this more intuitive departing point. And sometimes we only shown one part of the journey, but it goes from the intuitive to the more explicit, worked out, tedious even, back to that intuition.
Great, thank you. Next, let's go from audience questions directly. Let's go to Ron.
Thank you. So just to preface my question, I was having the same experience as Alex, because I'm reading The Master and the Emissary now, and I was also thinking about the right, and then it goes to the left, and then it comes back to the right. And I was thinking of David Bohm's, it's the implicate, it goes to the explicate, and then it ultimately merges back into the implicate. Now, the question though, and I will see if this, what I preface this with, it could be connected. A question is asked, the coins are tossed, and what I was noticing is that Alex has an opportunity to interpret the hexagram, and Shantena has a opportunity to interpret the hexagram. So in each case, your individual consciousness is participating in the hexagram, and most likely it will be interpreted differently. How do we connect this, the consciousness participating in the interpretation? How do we make sense of that in the bigger picture?
Yeah, I see. Shantena.
I think with the universe's help, it's consciousness is somehow there all along, participating in the whole process. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's as if the universe gives us a little push, or opens a little window.
And maybe an answer from my side would be, well, literally through context. I mean, I know Shantena, I've spent some time with him. We've been talking for an hour or more. He's reading these lines, and the way he's reading them, it's very particular of that moment, with the intonation or the emphasis he makes on this word or that word, the inflection of the voice. I'm not saying I'm computing all of that, but all of this becomes literally a context from which then I express how I interpret it. And also those words and those ideas were written by somebody else and translated by somebody else. So in a way, it's already all interwoven, I would say.
Yeah, there's a whole tradition behind it. And many people who have thought about, lived through, the whole history is still present when we consult I Ching.
You don't seem satisfied with the answer, Ron, or maybe help us interpret now your facial expressions as to.
Yeah. What's coming to mind is, with the hologram, there's the whole, and every bit of it is individual and yet is part of the whole, and everything is interconnected. You know, we know about entanglement and so forth, and that looking at the creation from the personal point of view versus looking at it from the impersonal, universal point of view, ultimately from the spiritual aspect, there's no difference. There's no difference between Alex and Shantana in essence, but in manifestation, they're unique. This is like, I think Ian says, it's like, you know, the science can take you so far, and then you have to enter the poetry. And that's, I suppose, the frustration on my face is that the science can only take us so far, and the poetry for me is a process, a practice of going into the silence, and that's inexplicable in terms of it's not effable, it can't be spoken about. So it has to be experienced. Anyway, these are all just unfinished, you know, insights.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
perhaps they cannot be finished, and they don't need to be finished. One of my favorite books, or maybe my favorite book, is the I Ching. It starts with the line saying, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao."
That's why we have to go into the silence.
Yes.
And Alex, as a scientist, would be, I'm sure that rubs him a little bit.
Yes, it should, as it should.
Thank you, Ron, for coming in and for your contribution. Next, let's go to Michael.
Hi, thank you. This series has been amazing, and Alex, you brought up context, and for me, I have a question for both you and mainly Shantena. With context, possible context for the I Ching, because Alex had mentioned about programming, and what I found is that if you're developing a complex system, you're starting with kind of this amorphous unknown, which is in itself a whole, and you end up with a different type of architecture if you start by defining pieces and then trying to put them together, rather than taking the whole, even though you don't know what it is at the time, and then gradually defining it, almost like you'd sketch on a canvas for a large piece of art. You wouldn't work the detail at all the corner. It would be a whole all the way through. So what I'm wondering is it possible, especially with like the cosmology of it's something like the Tao Te Ching, with like Wu Ji, the great unknown or the great void, and then the Tai Chi, is it possible that their context was different, so that when we think of the yarrow sticks or coins, we think of them as being inherently separate? But if you start with like the unbounded whole, then everything's always going to be related or relative back to that. I don't know.
I've been enchanted by the movement of your hands.
Oh.
It seems somehow they were answering your question.
But I mean, is that possible within the context of, say, like Chinese thought? Because the best I can approach is from like a Westerner who hasn't been to the East. So I don't know.
Would you repeat the question?
Is it possible that their context, the Eastern what we would call the Eastern context, would start with the whole, whereas our Western context, aside from maybe quantum, we tend to start with like the pieces, like the fingers, instead of saying, there's the palm, they're all connected from the get-go.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
You've proposed this already entangled in time and space. Now I would go one step above and say, perhaps your very starting point of making this distinction between East and West has a preceding step, which is a wholeness, in the sense that we use it because it's useful, but I think in a way the East is in all of us and the West as well, right?
Agreed. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm separating East, even though I look at East and West as, it's human. But I'm wondering, the question was more so I'm not making assumptions for context of the I Ching itself and imposing like some kind of a holistic model or context with the culture from which it may have emerged. That was the question.
I think we've created an atmosphere today, or it has been created, where the questions are not even, we cannot even articulate them nor answer them, right? These are different kinds of questions. Like every time somebody asks anything, well, I better shut up. That would be the best answer. And I think that's a good sign at this point. Yes, it's like they're there, but the moment we try to articulate them, it doesn't sound good, at least on my side. Maybe that's why Shantena was saying the very movement of your hands, perhaps, is the best way of asking and answering it.
Perhaps. Yes. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your contribution. And next, let's go to Lena. Hi, Lena.
Hi. Oh,
Hi, Lena.
am I unmuted?
No. No, you're not. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you for this series that I've enjoyed, as usual, so much. And it's so funny because I was thinking about his hands that you were saying, the movement. I've been dancing with the I Ching for 20 years about. I've been interested in it for about 20 years. And I was going to say, I always used it whenever I felt like I was stuck, like in a circular thinking type of thing. And I would use the I Ching to unstuck me, like to make me part of a flow again. And it's so funny because my youngest son one day said, Mom, you're so weird because you're so like scientific and then you do this. And he couldn't figure it out. I said, well, you know what? Whatever it is, it always speaks to me. And we were talking about context. I would read, because I've been using it for 20 years. So many times I read the same one, right? The same definition. And it would always have a different meaning. Because of the context in which I was asking, and I never use it as a definition or whatever you call it for the future. I was always to, as I said, when I felt stuck, it would bring me back to a flow of thinking. And then I would reflect on this, and it always helped me. And it was funny how I realized that I'd read that thing, and that's not what I understood the other time that I read it. And it was because of the context. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I wanted to mention the context and the flow of thinking. And of course, I started 20 years ago with a very, I would say, Western texts. Like they were very adapted and very like down to earth. And then eventually I came to seek the more original texts. And then I met Shantena, which was so like, he had translated the I Ching. I'm like, okay, this is so weird. And the as I said, the profoundness of the text and this openness, and that's the other thing I wanted to mention, the creation. The I Ching for me, because I always used it when I was stuck, it always created something else. It made me in such a movement of life, and that's where creation, like the I Ching for me, is part of creation of life. So thank you so much. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Next, let's go to Claudius.
Hi there. It's been a great conversation, and it is nice to be sitting on the other side of the valley, up on the mountainside here, where Shantena is. I've been thinking about this whole idea of the scientific method and meaning making. And Alex, your comment about, is meaning making actually making things up? So it is the meaning making piece that is fascinating for me in this context, and the I Ching as an instrument for helping meaning making. I'm thinking of Jan Smuts, who is the author of Holism, and one of our previous speakers actually mentioned a holistic perspective functioning from the whole. And Jan Smuts, at his very vital address to the British Association for the Advancement of Science, where he was inaugurated as president, 1931, he said that what has been missing is a fruitful dialogue between science and philosophy. That if science was not having a conversation with philosophers, it was not making meaning of the very work it was doing. So I'm curious about this. In 2017, I attended the Starmus conference in Norway, the largest gathering of Nobel Prize winners in science. And the head of the UNESCO asked the question, should science be purpose-driven? And the response was, no, it is just there to follow the knowledge. It doesn't have an intention other than to follow the knowledge. And yet, with the wonderful science that we have, we've not been able to address the existential issues of the day. And so I'm thinking about the whole notion of being able to use abductive thinking rather than inductive and you know, the abductive thinking as the detection of patterns and then allowing the patterns to elicit something. And so my specific question is the I Ching, or the methodology that you've described, actually a bridge to help us to frame, to recognize patterns, to frame them, to make meaning in a way that we can actually change and be more resourceful in dealing with our existential issues? I think that's the question that I want to put specifically. It's about abductive reasoning and the potential role of instruments like I Ching to support that.
Shantena, you want to go ahead?
I agree, Claudius. I think definitely so. And as Lena said, it's like it helps us to get unstuck, and by doing that, helps meaning to emerge. And meaning has to do with the whole and not with the single parts. So the I Ching in that sense is a tool.
A more down-to-earth comment from my side would be to ask, it may sound like an off question, but I often wonder whether the electron, let's say, is discovered or invented, right? Ask this question. Or a planet even, is it discovered or invented? And I think the answer is it's both. And so that to me has to do with meaning making or bringing birth to it, as Shantena said a few minutes ago. And it reminds me of Bruno Latour, who recently passed away. And his remark, which is a very Western sociology / philosophy of science, that laboratories are these places where people and machines and culture and human arrogance and hope and all of that gets in there, and what comes out is a fact. And a factum, it's something that it's made. But how come? Are facts made up? Well, they're not made up, but they're certainly made by humans, right? So it's not just meaning, I think it's everything from a bottle. Like the bottle is something that allows you to drink water, so it's already in relationship. So it's both in a way invented and discovered. So, well, that's what your question brought to my mind, that we are constantly doing it, not just with the I Ching, but we're constantly both discovering and inventing reality as we go.
Yeah. And you could maybe say that reality is inventing itself through us.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Claudius, for coming in. Now we have gone a little over, so unfortunately, I guess we should start closing this session. As always, I'd like to come back to you two, if you have anything to leave us with before we close this session.
I'm having a feeling of something very concrete and particular and unique, which is back to when I met you, Shantena. So you see, it's not a grand thought or an abstract idea. It's that encounter we had. I was recovering from a surgery. I was weak. It was hot. We drove with our little ones. It was a tiring day, but I feel that was really one of the portals through which all these blessings are just pouring down. And so, well, this sense of that encounter and everything that has happened after that, and how incredible that 12 or 13 months after that encounter, we were having dinner at Paris, and this interesting transition between you retiring or leaving the role of director and myself about to be asked to take it. Well, to me, this is a kind of a love story between the two of us. So that's what I would say.
That's right. And of that meeting on the beach, I especially remember your girls, so beautiful and so free and so creating.
Yeah.
It was kind of the archetype of the moment.
I see. Thank you.
Oh, thank you both, really. This has been such a profound session, and yet very close to family. I mean, it's all Park Center people here, which is wonderful. Now, before we go, I'd just like to invite you to a few events coming up. Alex, would you like to mention something that's upcoming?
Yes, well, ending up here would have been good enough, but we decided, I proposed to have one wrap-up session. I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to wrap up, how much paper and how much gift we have to wrap up. But a wrap-up session next week, next Wednesday, not Tuesday, next Wednesday, 21st, is the solstice. We'll wrap up these 12 installments, and also we're gonna swap. So it's not gonna be like somebody talking, in that case me, and then 30 minutes for question, but it's in a way I'm having the future scientist with you. So we're gonna be talking. I'll summarize some ideas and explain where I come from, how this was started, where it went, where it could have gone. And I will also speak about the plans for next year. As I've mentioned it already, some of you may have heard it, I felt like the future scientist itself had to evolve into something that's not constrained to this small but yet big small topic of a scientist. So we're going to start the Future Human series next year. And so it's going to be a transition to say goodbye and thank you to this amazing year, and to, in a way, prepare and discuss what this future human may be.
Great. Well, thank you, Alex. And it really has been a wonderful year with the future scientists. We've had so many guests, and it'll be great to have this sort of wrap-up session next week on the 21st. And the official title is The Future Scientist, a recapitulation, and there's more on the website on this.
Yes.
But before that, we will have on the 15th, so this is Thursday, another free event with Mark Vernon in conversation with Beth Macy, called Spiritual Intelligence: What it is, how can it be cultivated, and why does it matter? And this is to celebrate the launch of Mark Vernon's new book, which has the same title. And it's a free event, so we do invite you all to join us then. So yes, so with that, I'd just like to thank you again, Alex and Shantena, and of course, everyone here too that joined us today. Thank you for your lovely messages that have been coming in the chat. And yes, we'll see you again soon here at the Power Center. Thank you all.